Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us today. We are going to be talking about Summit Analytics within the Edelweiss Analytics tools. And if you don't know me, my name is Joe, and I am the Bookseller Success Manager, which is a new title, actually. But yeah, so my job is to make sure that you guys know how to use this stuff and use it well, and hopefully make your stores a little bit stronger as a result of that. And again, so we're talking about Summit Analytics. The analytics tools are, there's two subscription levels. One is Summit and one is Basecamp. So obviously we have a mountaineering thing going on. Our company name is above the tree line. So take that for what it is. But essentially the differences are that the Basecamp version essentially just takes your point of sale data, your sales and inventory history, and feeds it into the comp titles area of Edelweiss. So like you can see on the screen here, be able to see the first 3 months worth of sales, first 3 months of average on-hand inventory, and then lifetime sales, last year's sales, current on hand and current on order for titles that publishers have selected as hopefully good comparable titles for whatever you're buying. So it just really speeds up the buying process. And again, so that's what the Basecamp level is. The Summit level has that as well as a whole bunch of other tools, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So really what we're doing is I'm going to show you a little bit about managing your account, and then we're going to really dive into each of the different tools. And hopefully you'll walk away with a good working knowledge of how to make use of the tools and dive in and start measuring your inventory, essentially. We do have, we do basically blocks of webinars. This is the second of 3. The first one is a shelf report, which is a new report for Summit users. And then this is getting to know your Summit subscription. And then the next one's for people who are not sure if they want to go with Basecamp or Summit. And so we'll be talking about the differences between those. The differences are stark because one has one thing and one has a lot of things. So, but it should be an easy webinar. And I really am not good at the transitions there. So basically I'm going to show you again just a couple quick things here on the homepage, setting up some widgets that might be helpful, and also setting up other users, and then where to find some help. And also, we do record these videos and post them on the help site, so I'll show you where to find those. Let's do that first, actually. So gotta move my little webinar thingy here. There we go. If you click into help right here, you'll see help with Edelweiss Analytics. That'll take you to a site that basically there's essential knowledge, and then it will walk you through each of the different tools. Really, mostly more than anything else, it's like what the tools do and how to set your different settings and parameters and that sort of stuff. But within like the essential knowledge here is going to be an explanation of shelf days and how to use filters and all that kind of stuff. And we also post these videos here. And this one will probably replace this introduction one because it is a little bit older. You can also find all webinars under training on all the help sites. And you'll see one for bookstores here, and there's a lot of stuff in there. Author event grids, how to buy, for beginners and all that kind of fun stuff. So you can find some good help there. And then, so on the homepage itself, you're going to be able to add different widgets once you're a Summit user. So a widget is basically just going to be a little tool. You'll see like the recently viewed. If you look at your Edelweiss homepage, you're going to have a lot of different widgets, and you can really set it up to however it works best for you. But to add widgets specifically for the analytics stuff, you just click on Add Widget. And then down at the bottom is going to be Analytics. And you can add one for the shelf reports, the most popular titles, popular titles that you don't have, and also top not yet released titles. You can also add those. You can add multiple variations of this. So for example, you can see there are 2 most popular titles widgets here. You can come into the lane preferences, little gear icon there, and change filters if you want. If you want one for fiction and one for history and one for young adult, that sort of thing, you can definitely do that. But you can also change the store. So these very interestingly named locations for this 5-location store are demonstration 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So hopefully yours are more interesting. But so you could set up a widget for the most popular titles and titles that you don't have for each of your stores, that sort of stuff. More than anything else, it's really just a way for you to see the analytics tools just front and center all the time whenever you go in Edelweiss, just a blatant beat you over the head reminder that there's some work that you could be doing and dialing in your inventory. To remove a widget, you just click the X here. Now to manage your analytics users at your store, you just come up here and click on your name. My name is demonstration user. You click into account users, and then you see a list of everybody who's connected to your organization. And so I'm going to click into Jason here and see what privileges he has. So right now he is a user administrator, which means that he can do exactly what I'm doing right now and see other users and change their privileges and remove them or add other users if he likes. He also has buying privileges. If you click into here, you can also add analytics viewer, analytics administrator, and emailed report recipient. So analytics viewer simply gives him access to the analytics tools themselves. Analytics administrator is at this point kind of a placeholder for future development things that we're working on. That should be pretty cool. And then the emailed report recipient is basically adding them to the list of people who get an email about the shelf report, which is a semi-annual report that comes out. It's kind of like a report card for all the work you do on your inventory. And there is a previous webinar. If you go back and look at that training stuff of all the videos, you'll see a shelf report one listed there. I didn't save that, so none of those changes took place for Jason here. So make sure you save it if you do want changes to take place. There are a few other things I want to show you. I'm going to click into this tiger tail since that was our most recently viewed catalog here. So as an analytics subscriber, you have a couple other tools available to you when you look at any list of titles. It's snowing here today, so my internet is creeping along. This is quite frustrating. But you'll see over here, so there's different ways to view a catalog. Excuse me. There's the list view like you're used to seeing here, and then there's a 2-column view, which is a way for you to quickly scroll through a list of titles, and then more like a grid view, which is a very, very simple list of each title with its really basic bibliographic info. And then you also see an analytics view here. And this is super cool. So again, any list of titles that you're looking at, whether it's a catalog, an old order, list of tags, or a collection, the buzz stuff, review copies page, like anything, any list of titles that you see, you can view through an analytics lens, which is essentially like a stock analysis sort of lens. So you're going to be able to see, of all the titles within this list, what you're stocked on, what you're not stocked on. This is a list of titles that aren't out yet. So there's not going to be any stock activity in here. But you will be able to see market activity and, sold and ordered percentages and all that kind of fun stuff, which we will get into a little bit later. So this is a great tool to use. You can change some of the lane preferences, how far you look back, whether or not you're looking at only stock titles or every title on the list, and then you can change and view by turns or by shelf days. The shelf days is the measurement that you're going to see on the analytics page itself, and we're going to talk about that quite a bit here in just a few minutes. So this is a great view, a great way to measure the success or non-success of a list of titles. Somebody brought up at Winter Institutes that it seems like this would be a good way to create a tag of titles that you put in your front window, and then you can see how those titles perform, which ones sell, what kind of titles sell better than others out of that display, that kind of stuff. Or doing a have your booksellers tag their staff picks, and then having kind of a contest to see whose staff picks perform the best, and have wine or pizza or something be the prize. And I say this all the time, but you dangle free food or free booze in front of a bookseller and see what happens. Or anybody, probably. There's one other thing on here, and then we'll jump into the tools. But within the other actions, there is an option to view. Sorry, I'm getting click happy here. It really is quite slow. Sorry, guys. So I'm waiting for this to complete filling in. Basically, you're going to be able to see within this list of titles, there's this analytics data option here, which if there is analytics information available, like here, you're going to be able to see on hand, on order, sold percentages, that kind of stuff for each title. So like if we look at The Martian, for example, it's like we can see for here, this Fantagraphics, The Martian Monster and Other Stories, which is bumped out of the way, had 4% on hand. The Martian itself is trade paperback, sold in 17% of stores, is on hand at 72% and on order at 3% of stores. And at this particular location, they sold 3 copies, and that's going to be within the time frame set in this little guy here. So this is within the current month. So generally speaking, you probably want to bump that back a little bit if you want to get a longer tail view. But as you're going through, especially if you're looking at backlist or something like that and looking for that sort of information, you're going to be able to find just that extra level of information on a title, as well, of course, as your comparable titles and that sort of thing. All right, to the analytics tools. So there has been a recent update to the navigation, and that is that there are now some refinements over on the left-hand side, and we're looking at adding more of those. But essentially, publisher and imprint, BISAC category, your point of sale categories, and then any tags that you have, you can add those, click those in, and view all the analytics tools through. If you want to only see biographies, for example, you click there, it'll change every tool on the page. So again, that's going to be for BISAC categories. Once you start using point of sale categories, that's going to be your categories and where you place titles. And because that's such a personal, I guess, delineation, you're not going to be able to use the most popular and the not yet released titles. Because those are market analysis layers. So generally speaking, if you are wanting to use, if you want to look at biographies, it's better to look at a BISAC biography category than at your point of sales category. That's if you want to see what's happening within that sort of category, and then find ways to fix those things that are happening, which we'll get into a little bit more. If you don't see this refinement, it could be because it's hidden. So you can add or remove those things here. Add or remove from your view, I should say. And you can also apply saved filters. So the saved filters, so the refinements are like for those quick, I just want to see how Random House titles are doing. So you scroll down and find Random House and click at it. And then you only see Random House titles. But if you're looking to say, show me Random House trade paperback biographies, then at that point, you're going to want to create a saved filter, especially if it's something that you come back to all the time. And within this, you're going to find genre filters, which are useful, and then also any filters that you've been using lately. Then to create a new filter, you just click on Add New Filter, and you'll see a ton of options in here on different ways to slice and dice your inventory, essentially. I just said slice and dice. I hate that term, but here we are. Yeah, so you can choose a particular publisher if you like, but you can also go by publication date. So if you want to see HarperCollins young adult urban realism titles that came out between September and December, you can totally just measure that very precise level of titles if you like. So nice and easy. If you do have multiple locations, you will find those up here. You can choose between them. I'm just going to use the one here, the demonstration 3. It just has richer data as of all the demo stores here. And one more spot I want to show you. You may have these lanes showing up in a different order on your page. I actually prefer the order that I have it in right now. I'm very a little OCD about it. But if you come up here and click the tools icon and then click on analytics, you can see the different lanes and you can move them around. I'm actually hiding 2 of them. The multi-location stores will have location comparison and location performance comparison, which we're not actually going to talk about today because there's actually not that many stores that it affects, but we are going to do some videos about those 2 tools a little bit later on. So to move them around, you just grab one and drag it around wherever you like. I have this set, so most popular not yet released titles are up at the top. Those are the 2 market analysis tools. And I like them to be together, and those are generally the ones that get the most play because they're the most interesting, to be honest. And then underneath that, I do the stock analysis, which I think is pretty important. So. Great, so now we're going to talk about the most popular titles first, since that's up here at the top. So essentially what we're looking at is the most popular titles among the specific number of titles that you select, in the market that you select, and in the time frame that you select. So you select those via here. You click on the gear icon to get your lane preferences, and you can change your market. You're going to see all the regionals here. You can also compare to libraries or to UK booksellers, which is incredibly interesting actually, or Christian bookstores if you like as well. We do a lot of work with libraries nowadays, so you can see a lot of that stuff. You're going to see a lot of DVDs in there, which is interesting. Generally speaking, I like looking at the entire indie bookseller market for most things, like fiction and stuff like that. Most stores or most readers hear about books from the same places, and it's just a richer, fuller list. You're not going to see a ton of difference between New England retailers and the US indie booksellers when it comes to like fiction and stuff. But if you are wanting to look at history or gardening or something like that is more regional, then by all means click whatever region you happen to be in. And then the time frame, If you look at the current month, you're going to see what's hot and selling right now, like right this minute. Whereas if you look 12 months back, that's going to be essentially what's sold throughout the year, has that longer tail, kind of it's going to include Christmas and summer and all that kind of stuff. So it's like a big glob. And in that case too, you will see when you're looking farther back, you're going to see hardcover sales for a title that may be out in paperback now, because it sold better than all the other things essentially. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then you can say how many titles you want to look at, and that's kind of a function of how big is your store, how much time do you have to go through stuff, that sort of thing. And then you can say minimum on hand, so you only want to see things that you have one or more copies of, that sort of thing. And then this guy here is the shelf days. So we're going to talk about the shelf days for a few minutes here, because it is the measurement that most of the tools on this page are going to use. And it's actually really simple. It takes the number of copies on hand multiplied by the number of days since last activity, whether received or sold. So if you can see that all these titles that we're looking at now are in the red section of this pie, which means that they're not in stock. So they have a shelf days number of 0 because there's no activity. But if we look at, for example, the stuff that is in the green, which means it's doing well, there's recent activity on it. If we look at this Women Rowing North, this particular store has one copy that was last sold 6 days ago. So it has it has one copy on hand. It was last sold. The title itself was last sold 6 days ago. So it has a shelf days number of 6. Whereas if we look at, let's see if I can find one that has multiple copies. Yeah, so Ready Player One has 2 copies. It was last received 6 days ago. And so it has a shelf days number of 12. So 2 times 6 is 12. What this does is it calculates the total number of shelf days. So the number of days since a title has seen activity, whether that's 1 copy, 2 copies, so it's total number per copy. So essentially what we're looking at is a range in here. So again, if we look at your calculation here, we have it set so fresh, that's the stuff in the green, that bright green, are those titles that have a shelf days number of 90 or less. So basically 1 copy sitting there for 3 months without selling is kind of okay. Once it gets farther out than that, maybe we want to do something about that. Whereas, if you have 90, if you have 9 copies on hand and it's been sitting there for 10 days, that 9 copies is a larger investment than the single copy. So it's something that definitely needs your attention now, whether it's being displayed better or hand sold or whatever you got to do to sell those books. And oftentimes when we start to look at these less green portions of the pie here, we're looking at titles that have been sitting around for quite a while. So I'm actually going to look in the stale here. So keep in mind that these are the most popular titles among the indie trade market, and they're selling well everywhere else, except for your store, basically is what this means. So we can see Shade by Pete Souza. The store has 32 copies on hand, which is really a lot. And it's been 23 days since it, like there's something up, like this book has died or it's not being displayed well or something. 32 copies they need to move now. That's too many to just sit there stagnant like that. And you'll see that this has 11 copies on hand and last sold 50 days ago. That's crazy. That's too long. So essentially with this one, like I would probably want to return at least some of those, or do a George Saunders display or something, get those moving. But so now we're talking like, am I going to do a display for every single title that hasn't moved in a while? Like maybe. That's kind of up to you. And again, like if you have a stack of books, that itself, a stack itself, is a display on its own. But is it in the right place? You know, etc. You know how to sell books. So from here we can, you know, well, actually, generally speaking, what you're going to be looking for here within the most popular titles are stuff that you are missing, whether it's, you know, it's been sold and is out of stock and you haven't reordered it yet, or, you know, Santa Bruce may or may not be relevant now after Christmas. Although my daughter would totally read that now. She loves this guy. But this was actually last sold 73 days ago, so maybe that's okay, maybe not. But these are titles that, again, are selling great everywhere else that you do not have on hand. So, like for example, if you want to bring Born a Crime in, you can pop it in here and just quickly add it to an order if you like. Just click into orders. And you can create an order here or select an existing order. And then, of course, add your numbers. You know how to order books in Edelweiss. And then that'll be added to that order. If you want to do a bulk situation, you're going to want to create a collection of these titles, and which is essentially like creating a catalog of those titles that you can order from as you please. So you view titles in grid, and it's going to open up a title detail grid here. And just to be clear, we're not going to get into this much detail on all the lanes, because this is how all the lanes work essentially. So we're just spending some time right now on that. So within this list, you can see market information, bibliographic information, and then information about the location that you're looking at. So the shelf days, sales within the specified time frame, which is 3 months again, and then current on hand, current on order, and also the gap from the average order. So the average order is here. So in American Marriage, the average order for that right now is 4.2 copies. And so you see the gap from that average is negative 4.2. That's not as relevant in this list as it is in the not yet released list, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then you can also see where you put this title in your store. So from here, if you want to add all these titles, these are titles that you want to bring in. You can go to other actions, select them all, out of 6, that's not too hard to do. And then you can add to a collection or tag them if you like. It's kind of totally up to how you like to operate. You can just create a quick order now, say, you know, we're going to do wholesale on this, get them quick. Bada bing. So basically, as you're going through these tools, you can just keep adding stuff to that Ingram list. And then when you go back, you can go look at that collection and create an order and order however many copies you like, and then export it to your point of sale system and all that fun stuff, all the stuff that you're used to doing now. To find a collection, you go over into catalogs. And you'll see my collections. There's that order now Ingram. So you can click in there just like a regular catalog and you know, create an order or add to an existing order, however you have it going, and do your thing. And again, you can also see that market information here. All right, back to the analytics tools. So let's say you were the kids buyer at your store. You don't touch the adult side. All you're doing is kids. So from there, if you like, you can come down and quickly grab, you know, juvenile fiction and nonfiction, and then the young adult stuff. Or if you have a save filter, which I do, you can do that for the kids only titles, which I've created a save filter that has all the kid stuff already selected. So again, when you create a filter or apply a filter there, it's going to change everything that you're looking at. So again, really the idea here is to, locate a problem. So in this case, kids titles that you're missing, or kids titles that are dead, you just can't sell them, or stuff that you sold and haven't reordered, that kind of stuff. So basically you can find an issue, where our turns are really low, we're going to do some returns and we're going to restock with some fresher stuff, that kind of thing. So you can really just kind of scroll around each tool and find titles to bring in, titles to get rid of, that fun stuff. That's totally the idea here. So that's really the most popular titles there. I'm going to now bump down into the not yet released. So these are upcoming titles. You can see pub date of today or later is how we have it set up, the top 200. Again, you can change this date. So right now we have it set to anything after today, but you can also include an upper bound, we call it. So if you want to say anything from today until the end of the month. So this is going to basically show you books that are coming out this month and how you're positioned on those, whether you have them on order, which is the yellow, or not on order, which is the red. One point to understand here is that this is on order based on what we get from your point of sale system. So this does not include draft POs that exist in Edelweiss. So these are not Edelweiss orders. These are orders that are in your point of sale system. It's showing as on order there. So again, you can come through here. Right now we want to see titles that we don't have on order, but they are relatively popular. So this is going to be popular based on, of course, on order information from your peers. So both of these tools, the most popular and the not yet released titles, are going to be very much based on like a collaborative aggregation of all the analytics users' data. So we can see basically the ordered percentage here. 53% of all analytics stores have this last voyage of Poe Blythe on order. 970 copies ordered total, 4.2 copies is the average. One thing to keep in mind is that if the average order is 2 and you have 1 on order, you're fine because you can restock pretty quickly. If the average order is 150 and you have 2 on order, maybe take another look. So you're looking for the extremes here, really. I just remember I was doing a training one time with a store. It was right when one of the George R.R. Martin titles came out in hardcover, and she had 2 on order, and she was very pleased with that because she didn't care about fantasy books at all. The average order for that particular title was 75. So she decided maybe she was going to order 5 more, and she didn't run out until noon that day. She was excited to tell me. But just keep in mind that this is a way really for you to kind of crowdsource your front list buying in a way. It's really easy to miss titles, whether it's because they were a drop-in or you don't care about that kind of book at all. That doesn't just because you don't care about a type of book doesn't mean you have to do a bad job of ordering it, basically, and you know that. But this is just another layer of information to help you make those decisions on what to bring into your store. And of course, I always would like to say that this is very much a descriptive rather than a prescriptive service. So we are not telling you that you need to order these books. We kind of don't care if you order them or not. We're just telling you everybody else, not half of the other stores stores out there have them on order, and they've ordered them in quantity. So take that information and do with it what you will. And so again, we're looking at titles that you don't have on order. If you want to, for example, if you have a Random House order ready to go, you can, create a Random House only list here and add stuff to that order if you like, to kind of, if you're wanting to beef up minimums or make sure you're not missing something big, that sort of stuff. All right, so I'm actually going to remove this kids only filter. Clear. So that's the not yet released titles. So again, the most popular and the not yet released are going to be the market analysis tools here. Once we get down into the stock analysis, this is where we're really digging into your inventory and how it's performing. And that's the whole point of the stock analysis tool itself, is to, right now it's showing you all of your inventory. And if you get, like for example here, erasers, I'm assuming those are actual like pencil erasers. So if we're getting a sidelines feed from you, then those will show up in here as well. If you don't want to see those, that's great. You can create a save filter according to format and just show me hardcover and paperback, that kind of stuff. But I would argue also that it's important to see those sidelines as well, of course. And if you have your point of sale categories, if you had one that's just sidelines, great. You can just look at those. And you can also say not sidelines, for example. That being said, right now we're looking at the green titles. So again, those fresh titles. So they have great shelf days scores. These are all 6. The excuse me. Most of your store, as you can see, like in this one, is going to be in this stable range. So there is some action, but it's been a little bit, and that's how most of your store tends to operate. You're not going to have every title in your store selling like hotcakes. That's just unfortunately not quite how it works. It would be great if it did. So these titles, I would personally, just because everybody has limited time, I would ignore these for now. It's when they show up in the stale area here, which is the blue. These are titles that have just been sitting for a long time. Like you can see, well, I guarantee you this one is a local self-published author, probably. Not to denigrate self-published authors, but I know my audience. So this has a shelf days of 17,000, which is crazy. So basically that title is just never sold. Really what we're looking at here are a list of titles that could go away and your customers kind of just wouldn't care, which is a mean way to say it, but I don't know of any other business in the retail world where like people are encouraged to carry books that their customers don't want. Like, somebody will say, and I always pick on Faulkner's, I love Faulkner, but if you haven't sold As I Lay Dying in 8 years, your customers kind of don't care if you have that book or not, right? Like, and you can get it quickly if you need it and that sort of thing. Or if your favorite author is blank mystery author and you have all their books and you just cannot sell them. It's been 5 years since you sold a single copy. Like, honestly, like, maybe just reevaluate that and you don't have to bring them in. I was joking around with somebody one time and they asked me what I do, and I convince people to only carry stuff that their customers want, and often fail at that. Soapbox. What we have here, though, is, again, titles that are just kind of sitting there collecting dust. They're not paying their rent. In this case, 8 copies of Cloudy with a Chance and Meatballs haven't paid their rent since 2016. Those could very easily go away. So to create a pull list here, I'm going to click on View Titles in Grid. By pull list, I mean return pulls. There's that crazy loophole in the book selling world where you can return unsold merchandise, and you should very much do that, even though Publishers don't like to hear me say that. But you can come in here, click on other actions, and select all. Of course, you can go through and click each check mark here if you like. You probably don't want to do that. It doesn't usually take quite so long. So this particular store is pretty big. It's 61,000 total titles. This stale area here is 13,000 titles. This is a lot. 22.5. So we went through, when we started doing the shelf days thing here, we went through and basically looked at an average of all the stores and how their pie portions landed essentially. And the average stale titles is 25%. That's big store, small store. Some are much larger than that. I've seen 60%, which is terrifying. And I've also seen down to 1%, which is crazy. Those basically, there's a large difference here. The difference is that one store does returns and the other one does not. And their turns, the profitability of their store is a direct reflection of that as well. So we've 13,000 titles here. And then in other actions, we can come in here and say export to file. And I would use the E+ Analytics lean format. It's just a nice svelte Excel spreadsheet. Create. Of course, we'll go back. So basically that's going to create a spreadsheet. It's a large one, so we'll let it do its thing here. But then once you have that, you can go through it. Excel's great because you can sort it by all the different columns. So you can sort by point of sale category and then sort by publisher, sort by author after that, and get a nice easy list of titles that you can print out and take right to the shelves and start pulling. You're not going to want to do what I just did, which is print out a list of 13,000 titles. That way lies madness. Generally what you're going to do is pick a point of sale category or even just a few and do a return pull for those. Turn that off. Excuse me. Generally speaking, what I like to do, what I recommend doing is splitting your store up into quadrants and then create a schedule and return each of those quadrants, all the point of sale categories within that quadrant at a specific time each year. I like to do one quadrant a month, and then that means that you do very thorough return pulls 3 to 4 times a year, and your profitability will thank you, basically. That really cuts down on the books that your customers don't want to buy, basically. So next one down is a historical overview. This is basically taking the information that's here really and parsing it out according to sales, average inventory value, and turns. I always like to bump this out, the time frame, bump it out to 12 months. Turns is a 12-month calculation. So when you start looking at 3 months or 1 month, there's some multiplication that happens there and you can get some funky numbers. 12 months is a good way to go. So this store's average inventory value is 1.5 million, which is a lot. Sales are 3.4 mil, which is cool. Churns are 2.2, which is okay. Generally speaking, a good goal is 3. That's when stores tend to start become relatively comfortably profitable. If you're looking at your store's turns and they're like 0.8 or something like that, please do some returns. So or do what you need to do to move those books so that we can be talking to you in a few years. If your turns are 5, 6, 7, awesome. You're doing a great job, and keep it up. Within these graphs, we have sales, so we're going to see the red is the last 12 months, and the blue are the 12 months previous. And so you can see, generally speaking, sales-wise, there's a trend upwards at this store, which is great. Inventory-wise, there's also a trend upwards, although it's gone down a little bit. Generally speaking, if you're looking and your sales are relatively stagnant, but your inventory is creeping up, you're going to also see your turns creeping down. But in this case, the turns are actually not, they're a little bit better than they were the year before, which is great. And you can also see unit sales. So number of units that were sold per month, which is kind of an interesting calculation. What's nice is, like, if you see a spike, especially if we pick a, let's say, body, mind, and spirit here. So when you apply a refinement or a filter here, it's going to also apply to this lane. So we can see that the turns for body, mind, and spirit are 2.67, which is okay. If you see a spike, here's a spike in October, we want to see why that might be. You can click on that, and it'll open a title list view, or a title grid, I should say. And we can see, Haunted Lansing sold 71 units in that particular month. So that's why there was a bump. Probably there was an event for this. What's cool is you're going to know exactly why that is. When you look at your own stuff, you're going to know. Right now I'm guessing there was an event because I don't actually know the store. Right. So this is a really, really simple view. The historical overview is a simple tool here. Just a nice report card. The turns itself is that's a nice report card number for each of your categories. Excuse me. The restock support is really simple. These are the titles that sold since the day that you've selected. So basically all the titles that have sold in the last week within, we're still looking at body, mind, and spirit. So there were 13 titles sold out of that genre here. These are on order, the yellow. These are on hand. These are on hand, and the red are not on hand. So there were 6 titles that sold in the last week that were not reordered. Maybe that's okay. You sold it and it's been a while, so you don't want to bring it back in, or you just haven't done a reorder yet. But again, you can come in here, view the titles in grid, and see, within the time frame, like how many copies have you sold. In this case, the 5th agreement, since last week, sold 4 copies. Like, that's one that you probably want to get on reorder pretty quick. So your point of sale system generally does this really well. You can generate purchase orders based on what you sold, and then you go through it and fine tune it and that sort of stuff. So you can use this as a systems of checks and balances to make sure that you're not missing titles that you're selling, because that's what we're looking at here, titles that have sold. So arguably the most important titles in that section. You can also create orders while you're home if that's your thing. I know there's one store that I talked to who, their point of sale system is not online. It's just in the store. And so if she's at home, she can still work on stuff and still create orders and do reorders and that kind of stuff just right here. Which, I would rather she takes some time to relax, but she owns a business, so maybe she doesn't get to do that. So that's the nitty gritty with the restock support. And again, it's going to be very much based on your refinements. If you want to see your entire store and everything that's sold in the last week, you can change that as well. And you can also change this date. So I think it's a week by default, but you can change that as you wish. There is one thing I do want to show real quick. You're going to see these little envelopes here on some of the tools here. Stock analysis, restock support, and the most popular. Excuse me. So those are a way for you to get a regular email alert about whatever you want, really. So it's going to be very much based on how you have your page set up and how you have your lane set up here. So I'm going to do most popular titles. Let's look at biography, since it's there. I'm going to change this to the top 50 titles sold in the last month. Well, I flew too close to the sun there. I want to get a red slice of the pie there. So if you select that red slice, so these are going to be titles, in this case now, the top 100 biographies sold in the last, within the current month. If you click onto the envelope here, it's going to take all the parameters that you've selected here and see this amazing email address. So you can have this go to your email. You can name it whatever you like. I would recommend naming it something that's very clear, like recently sold or recently popular bio, etc. Don't do daily because you'll go insane. Weekly or monthly makes the most sense, kind of depending on how important this is and how urgent. So I'm going to say monthly. And if you click save, that'll basically, on the first day of each month, you'll get an email that shows 25 titles maximum that you can then click through and get more information about those titles that you were going to be out of. So you can do that for titles that you should return from the stock analysis, titles that are coming out next month that you have not ordered, all that kind of stuff. So again, it's very much based on how you have each lane set up, and when you click in there, it's just going to be kind of a nice automatic reminder. So in that way, the analytics tools come to you and serve as a nice reminder that there's some stuff going wrong that you might want to take action on. All right, so this one, the category performance comparison, is my favorite graph, essentially because of how granular it can be. So right now, it's taking your entire inventory. Do I have any? Yeah, no filter set up. So your entire inventory, and it's gonna, so I'm gonna, let's refresh this here real quick. Sorry, again, very exploded out according to various BISAC categories. And because BISAC is really granular, you with, like, say, within fiction, you have all the genres, mystery, thriller, science fiction, fantasy. So you can click in there and see how your fiction plays out and how how you sell different types of books and how you're stocked on those, how they turn, that sort of thing. So in this case, we're going to work on cooking because that's just right there. So basically how this is laid out is the inventory is laid out smallest to largest, left to right. So your smaller categories are going to be on the far left, your largest categories on the far right, and then the vertical is delineated according to turns. So low turns is at the bottom, high turns is at the top. So arguably speaking, this upper right corner here are going to be those categories that are the largest and the best turning, and probably the categories that are keeping you open. Whereas down in the lower right are those larger categories that just are not turning well. So generally what happens is that, the buyer assumes that their customers want a bunch of history, and then the customers don't buy those history books, or it's just overstocked essentially. And, you haven't done returns in a while, all that kind of fun stuff. Then the upper left here are those high turning small categories. So those are potential avenues for growth. Those maybe categories that would serve you well with another shelf, or maybe they're perfect. It kind of depends on your physical layout and which category it is. Some categories only have so many decent titles in them. So again, this is BIZAC. You can also look at this according to your point of sale categories, age, that kind of stuff. But right now we're gonna stick with BIZAC again because it is granular. So if we click into cooking, like we said, that actually is going to create a temporary filter. You can see up here at the top. So we clicked into cooking, and now all the lanes and all the tools in here are dedicated just to cooking. So what we can see is, cooking titles, we can see how we've done with those, what the turns are. You can see what is selling well. And then with, in that blue slice, these are cooking titles that could probably go away. And you can make room for more stuff, because the great big truth of book selling is that the books just never stop coming. So if this store does not have 10 titles that everybody else is selling pretty well for the most part. This one's great, by the way. But these are titles that you could bring in, and then here's titles that you could get rid of to make some room for those new ones. And here are titles that are not out yet, but you can see whether or not you've ordered them, etc. So essentially, what we can do is zero in on a problem category and then have a bunch of different tools to fix that category. So when we're talking about turns, it's a two-part calculation, right? It's sales divided by inventory. So you can either increase your sales, or maybe it's inventory divided by sales, basically. But you can increase your sales, which is hard, right? I mean, that's why you're open. That's why you hire the right people. That's why you advertise and display and all that kind of stuff. Or you can decrease your inventory, which is the thing that you have the most control over. So if you want a category to be more profitable, then get rid of the stuff that nobody wants to buy, basically. Again, my soapbox here. But you can scroll through there and see, there's, for the most part, this category does okay, but there are a few problem areas. You can click into the grid there and see, again, it gets really granular. So you can see, in baby food, $17 worth of sales, 1 unit, average inventory is 110 bucks. Current items on hand are 9 copies of baby food books, and the turns are 0.62. Now, something to stress here as well is that these comparisons here and where these categories land on the grid are based on, they're comparing to each other. So it's not comparing to some ideal that we've created. Everything has to have a turn of 3 or it's going to be in the red or something like that. That's not how it operates. It's going to be how these different categories of titles play against each other. So for example, I'll collapse this grid here. We see that specific ingredients is there in the red and is considered overstock. So we could click on there and you'll see that it creates a new filter there. So then we can come up here and say, show me titles that I can get rid of from there, essentially. and then again, show me stuff that I can replace those titles with if I want. And then you can erase all that by clearing out that temporary filter. And begin again. So it's really cool. You can actually, we're looking at the entire store now, and you can get a list of how each of the different genres, and again, you can do your point of sale categories in here as well, but you can see how all these genres compare to each other, and you get, again, that nitty gritty level of detail here. And you can export this to an Excel file if you really want to dig into it in different ways. So lots to do there. If you want, you can really get lost in there, which is, I should use it as a segue. There is, in the help documents, there is a document for a suggested schedule of analytics tasks. So this is basically my vision of how to use the tools themselves. So there's stuff that you can use daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and yearly. And it's really just like, if you're going to use all the tools and use them to the best advantage, you don't have to go in, click into the analytics, and just use everything all at once. Like, you go in and you just use the entire tool set. That's not realistic, and it's a good way to go insane. So I always like to suggest to people that you go in with a specific task in mind, and you complete that task, and you go on about your business and do the rest of your job. Whether that task is like, show me, my problem categories and let's do some returns, or show me, books that I'm missing this month, that kind of stuff. All right, so the last one is the catalog analysis, which is, this is a way for you to do a stock analysis report on a particular catalog list. So right now, this is the fall 2017 Andrews McMeel Publishing Children's Catalog. So you can see how you are performing on this particular catalog of titles, and basically how they've done for you. So looking at a particular catalog can be an interesting thing. If you're buying spring 2019 or summer 2019 right now, and you want to look at summer 2018 for Random House Green, for example, you can totally do that and see how those titles sold for you. You can also do that by looking at that catalog and using that display, the analytics display view. What's nice about this as well is that you can use your whatever collections you created. So you can not only use the official catalogs, but you can view it according to your own list of titles, which is also something we talk about. So this is, in a sense, this lane is a little bit redundant because you can view any list of titles out there according to that analytics view. I wanted to find that. I created that one. There we go. So that's that collection that I created earlier, and we can see how that is playing out here. So just another way to measure how your titles are doing. So that's really all the tools. We've gone over an hour here, so hopefully you're still awake, actually. But if you do have any questions, again, if you click on help with Edelweiss Analytics, and you'll get to the help site that has lots and lots of information there. And you can also, if you contact us, you can email us at support@abovethetreeline.com. And the more specific your question, the quicker we can answer you, and all that fun stuff. All right, thanks everybody for joining, and good luck.